The decision to return home always felt like swallowing something bitter. My hometown existed in that peculiar American limbo, too far from anywhere that mattered, too stubborn to die completely. The buildings sagged with decades of neglect, their paint peeling like sunburned skin. Most who stayed did so because leaving required an imagination they'd long abandoned. I'd escaped the moment I legally could, and now only the gravitational pull of blood brought me back. This New Year's visit should have been simple. See my brothers, laugh with old friends, pretend the place hadn't infected my dreams with its particular brand of emptiness. But both brothers had acquired girlfriends who'd moved into their cramped apartments, and I couldn't stomach being the awkward variable in their domestic equations. That left the hotel. Calling it a hotel was generous. It squatted alongside the gravel highway like something that had crawled there to die and simply never finished the job. No sign announced its purpose, just a building with that universal institutional ugliness that suggested lodging. I'd driven past it 1,000 times growing up and never once seen anyone enter or leave. I arrived well after dark. The parking lot stretched empty except for a single pickup truck that looked like it had been manufactured during a previous geological epoch. Rust consumed its wheel wells. The license plate was too obscured by grime to read. Inside, the lobby breathed stale air that tasted faintly metallic. A single lamp behind the counter created more shadows than illumination. I stood there for perhaps 30 seconds, listening to my own breathing, before I noticed the man. He rose from a chair in the corner with the slow, unfolding movement of something disturbed from sleep. 60-ish, I guessed. His beard grew in patches, gray and brown competing for dominance. His hair needed cutting, or had perhaps given up on the concept of being cut. He stared at me with an expression I couldn't quite categorize. Not surprise exactly, more like he was trying to remember something important that my presence had interrupted. "Need a room," he said. Not a question. His voice had the texture of gravel sliding down a metal chute. He produced a key from somewhere behind the counter, an actual metal key on a plastic fob with a handwritten room number. No credit card terminal, no registration book that I saw. He gestured down the hallway and I followed. The hall seemed to stretch longer than the building's exterior suggested possible. Our footsteps made sounds that didn't quite echo correctly, as though the walls were absorbing our presence. He stopped at the last door, inserted the key, and stepped back without entering. The room beyond looked exactly as I'd expected, aggressively mediocre in that way that suggested no one had updated the decor since the late 70s. A bed centered in the small space, a television mounted opposite it, a bathroom visible through a partially open door. Everything was beige or brown, or that indeterminate color things become when enough time passes. "Check out?" I asked, but he'd already started shuffling back down the hallway, leaving me standing in the doorway with the key growing warm in my palm. I showered quickly. The water pressure varied wildly, and the temperature couldn't decide if it wanted to scald or freeze me. Afterward, I lay on the bed, sheets that smelled like industrial detergent and something underneath I couldn't identify, and waited for sleep. It came eventually, but it didn't last. The knocking started at 3 in the morning. I know because I checked my phone, squinting at the screen in the darkness. The sound came from somewhere down the hallway, soft, arrhythmic, insistent. Not knocking on a door exactly, more like wood meeting wood with irregular patience. Knock. Long pause. Knock, knock. Silence. Knock. The walls were thin enough that I could hear it clearly, that slow percussion that suggested something trying to communicate in a language it had almost forgotten. I lay there in the dark, listening, my mind unable to commit to any explanation that felt satisfactory. Was it the old man? Another guest? The building settling in ways buildings shouldn't settle? Eventually, the knocking stopped and I drifted back into uneasy sleep. Morning arrived gray and cold. I dressed and walked to the lobby, expecting what? Coffee, perhaps? Some acknowledgement that this was a functional business. Instead, I found absence. The lamp behind the counter was off. The chair in the corner sat empty. No coffee station, no breakfast spread, no sign anyone had been there in hours or days. I spent the day with my brothers and friends, grateful to be around noise and movement and life. We ate at the town's only decent restaurant, told the same stories we always told, laughed at jokes we'd been laughing at for 20 years. Normal, human, real. But as evening approached and I had to return to the hotel, something in my chest tightened. The parking lot held only that same ancient truck when I pulled in around 9. No lights illuminated the building's exterior. Inside, the lobby had descended into complete darkness. I fumbled for my phone, using its screen to navigate to the hallway. My room door was locked, at least. That felt important somehow. I changed into sleep clothes and sat on the bed, debating whether to just leave, drive to a brother's place, sleep on a couch, admit defeat to a building that probably cost $30 a night. But before I could decide, the knocking started again. This time it was close, right outside my door perhaps, or in the next room. The sound was clearer now, definitely deliberate, definitely produced by something with intention. Knock. Pause. Knock, knock. Long pause. Knock, knock, knock. I stood frozen, heart accelerating, trying to apply logic to something that resisted it. Then I heard his voice. "Come down to the lobby." The old man's voice, rougher than before, coming from somewhere down the hallway. Not a request, an instruction. Before I could respond, I heard shuffling footsteps receding, moving away from me. Every instinct screamed to stay in my room, lock the door, pretend I'd heard nothing. But curiosity, that poisonous human trait, pulled me into the hallway. I had to know what he wanted, had to understand what was happening in this place. The hallway was dark except for my phone's inadequate glow. I walked slowly, aware of each door I passed, wondering what lay behind them. At the end, I turned into the lobby. Empty. Not just empty of people, empty of presence. The air felt vacated, abandoned, as though no one had stood there in years. I turned slowly, phone light cutting weak circles through the darkness, and felt the absence press against me like something physical. That's when the fear became concrete. Not the vague unease of strange noises or odd behavior, but the crystalline understanding that I was alone in a building that shouldn't be operating, that might not be operating, that the old man might be something that shouldn't. I didn't finish the thought. I walked quickly back to my room, locked the door, and sat on the bed with my back against the headboard, phone clutched in my hand, waiting for morning. Sleep never came. I listened to silence all night, which was somehow worse than the knocking. The next day, I mentioned the hotel to my friends, almost casually, testing the waters. Their reactions confirmed what I'd started to suspect. "That place closed down years ago," one said. 2 years? Maybe 3? "I thought they shut it after the owner died," another offered. "Or moved away. Either way, it's been empty forever." They noticed my expression and quickly backtracked. If I was staying there, surely they were wrong. Maybe it had reopened. Maybe they were thinking of somewhere else. But I could see it in their faces. They weren't wrong. That night, driving back, I considered my options. Get a different hotel in the next town over, an hour away, stay with family and admit something was deeply wrong, or return and face whatever was waiting. The parking lot still held only that truck, always that truck, positioned in the exact same spot, like it had been painted onto the asphalt decades ago. I walked inside more carefully this time, phone already out, flashlight on. Everything was dark and still. At my room, I stopped. The door was open, just slightly, maybe 3 inches, revealing nothing but darkness beyond. I should have left immediately. Instead, I pushed the door wider. My suitcase was where I'd left it, still mostly packed because some part of me had known not to settle in completely. I grabbed it quickly, deciding in that instant that whatever else I'd left behind, toiletries, a jacket, some books, wasn't worth the risk, wasn't worth staying in this place another minute. I hurried back down the hallway, suitcase wheels making too much noise against the worn carpet, into the lobby, toward the exit, freedom just meters away. Something made me look back. A sound too quiet to identify, or perhaps just instinct screaming its final warning. The old man stood in my room's doorway at the far end of the hallway, just standing there, partially visible in the darkness, watching me. Not moving, not speaking, just watching with an expression I couldn't read at this distance, but felt certain I didn't want to see more clearly. I ran. My brother answered his door in confusion, which turned to concern as I explained everything in a rush. He insisted we call the police, not for help exactly, but to file a report, to create an official record of something deeply wrong. What the police found was worse than I'd imagined. The hotel was indeed closed, had been for over 2 years. The property owners had abandoned it after moving to another state, leaving it connected to the power grid, but otherwise vacant. When officers searched the building, they found no evidence anyone had been inside recently. The room I'd stayed in showed no signs of recent occupation, no fingerprints but mine, no personal items, no indication the bed had been slept in. The truck was gone too. The parking lot stretched completely empty under the harsh morning sun. The officers were professional but skeptical. I could read their thoughts in the careful way they took my statement. This person found an abandoned building, stayed there illegally, and now needed a story to justify it. Possibly drugs were involved, possibly mental illness, possibly just someone wasting police time. They didn't say any of this, but I heard it anyway, in their tone, their exchanged glances, the way they wrapped up quickly and suggested I get some rest. I stayed with my brother for the remaining days, then left town early, unable to stomach the place any longer. Months later, I still can't explain it. The old man who shouldn't have been there, the room that functioned despite the building being abandoned, the truck that appeared and disappeared, the knocking that came from nowhere. But what haunts me most is a realization that arrived slowly, in pieces, until it formed a complete and terrible picture. I was alone in that hotel, completely alone. Which means when I heard the knocking at 3 in the morning, when I heard footsteps in the hallway, when I heard that voice calling me to the lobby, there was no one there making those sounds. No one except him and me. And I still don't know which possibility is worse. Christmas has always meant family for me, not in the greeting card sense, but in the practical reality of shared genetics pulling us into proximity once a year. My parents owned a cabin several hours south of where I lived, positioned strategically between their home and mine so the drive felt equal, fair, democratic in its inconvenience. The cabin itself was unremarkable. Wood construction, stone fireplace, windows overlooking forest that stretched for miles. We'd spent vacations there throughout my childhood, and the place carried that particular quality of locations revisited too often, familiar to the point of invisibility. I could navigate it in complete darkness, knew which floorboards creaked, which cabinet hinges needed oil. This year, I'd planned to arrive 3 days before Christmas. My parents and sister would join me for the holiday, and then I'd have the cabin to myself for 1 additional day. Solitude felt like luxury in a way it never had when I was younger. Time alone with no obligations, no performance of familial affection, just silence and trees and the steady erosion of city stress. I arrived late afternoon on December 22nd. The sun was already bleeding into the horizon, staining the snow-covered ground pink and orange. I parked, unloaded my bag, and spent the evening going through familiar motions, unpacking, showering in the bathroom with the finicky water heater, making tea in the kitchen with the temperamental stove. Everything worked exactly as it always had, which meant everything required minor adjustment and patience. By midnight, I was asleep. The next morning arrived crisp and bright, my 1 full day of solitude before the family descended. I made coffee and decided to walk the trail that looped through the woods behind the cabin. We'd worn this path over years of visits, our repeated footsteps creating a 2-mile circuit that required no navigation. I bundled into warm clothes, carried my coffee in a travel mug, and set out. Fresh snow had fallen overnight, perhaps an inch, enough to blanket everything in that perfect, unmarked white that never survives past morning. The woods were silent in the way winter woods are. Not absence of sound, but presence of quiet so complete it becomes its own texture. Wind moved through bare branches overhead, my boots crunched through snow. Nothing else. I'd walked perhaps half a mile when I noticed the disturbance. Marks in the snow. Definitely not animal tracks. Too regular, too human. Boot prints, clear and recent, the edges still sharp. Someone had walked through here within the last few hours, maybe less. I stopped, coffee mug halfway to my lips, and looked around. The woods offered nothing but trees and snow and silence. No houses nearby, no reason for anyone to be walking on what was essentially private property, or close enough that it made no difference. The prints continued along the trail. I followed them because the trail was going that direction anyway, telling myself this was nothing, a hunter who'd wandered too far, someone from a neighboring property I didn't know existed. Perfectly innocent explanations crowded my mind, each one reasonable, each one failing to calm the unease spreading through my chest. After another quarter mile, the prints were still there, still following the trail, and my rationalizations had worn thin. I turned back. Whatever peace I'd been seeking in this walk had evaporated, replaced by hyper-awareness of every sound, every shadow between trees. The woods that had felt empty now felt occupied, watching, patient. The walk back to the cabin felt longer than it should have. I kept my pace steady, refusing to run, but every step carried the weight of being observed. When the cabin finally came into view through the trees, relief flooded through me. Then I saw the prints leading to my front door. They came from the opposite direction, where the trail completed its loop. Fresh prints. Couldn't have been there when I left, or I would have noticed. Someone had walked directly to the cabin, right up to the door, while I'd been out wandering the woods. My hands shook as I looked around wildly, seeing nothing but trees and snow and the implacable silence of empty forest. Whoever had been here, whoever had stood at my door minutes ago, was gone, or hiding, or watching from somewhere I couldn't see. I rushed inside and locked the door, breathing hard, coffee forgotten. My phone signal was weak, but present. I called my parents, trying to keep my voice steady as I explained what I'd found. My mother's concern came through immediately. "Maybe you should get a hotel for the night, sweetie. We'll be there tomorrow anyway." "I'm fine," I said. "Not fine at all. I'll just stay inside, keep everything locked." What I didn't tell her, I'd left the cabin unlocked when I went for my walk. Why would I lock it? I was in the middle of nowhere, on private property, gone for maybe 45 minutes. Locking the door would have been paranoid, except now paranoia felt like wisdom I'd arrived at too late. I spent the day trying to relax, failing completely. Every sound made me flinch, every creak of the house settling felt significant. I kept the curtains drawn, which made the cabin feel smaller, darker, more like a trap than a refuge. The fireplace provided warmth and light as afternoon became evening, but it also created dancing shadows that my peripheral vision kept insisting were movement. By the time full darkness arrived, I was exhausted from constant vigilance, but sleep felt impossible, dangerous, like closing my eyes was an invitation for something terrible to happen. I sat in the living room as the fire burned low, drinking coffee to stay alert, watching the door. Hours passed with nothing happening, which somehow made everything worse. The anticipation stretched so thin it became painful. Around 10 p.m., I realized I'd never checked where those footprints led after reaching the cabin. In my panic, I just rushed inside without looking. Did they turn around? Head back into the woods? Or the alternative occurred to me slowly, each implication arriving like a physical blow. I stood up, walked to the front door, and opened it carefully. The porch light illuminated snow that looked blue in the artificial glow. I could see the prints leading up to the door, clear as before. I looked for prints leading away. There weren't any. The footprints came to the door and simply stopped. No prints retreating, no indication anyone had walked away, just a trail that terminated at my doorstep, as though the person had evaporated. Or my blood went cold as understanding crystallized. The door had been unlocked. The prints didn't leave, which meant I turned slowly, looking back into the cabin. The fireplace cast orange light that flickered across familiar furniture, creating pockets of shadow in corners, behind chairs, down the hallway leading to bedrooms. Someone was inside, had been inside, all day. While I'd been sitting here drinking coffee, trying to stay alert, convincing myself I was alone and safe, someone had been in here with me. A sound from the hallway, small, subtle, just a faint creak of floorboard under shifting weight. I looked down the hall toward the bedrooms. My bedroom door, which I'd left open, now stood at a different angle, and in the darkness beyond, a shape moved, slowly, deliberately. A person emerging from where they'd been hiding, stepping into the hallway, moving toward the living room, toward me. When he saw me looking at him, he froze. We stared at each other across the length of the cabin, me backlit by porch light, him visible only as a silhouette against deeper darkness. Then he ran at me. I grabbed my keys from the hook by the door and sprinted to my car, got in, locked the doors, started the engine, reversed wildly, nearly hitting a tree, then accelerated down the snow-covered driveway too fast, fishtailing slightly before finding traction. I didn't look back until I was miles away, and by then, the cabin had disappeared into the darkness behind me like it had never existed. The police were professional. They took my statement, drove to the cabin, found it empty. The man was gone, of course. But they found evidence in my bedroom. Scuff marks on the closet floor, barely visible but present when they looked closely. Their theory, he'd been hiding in the standing closet all day, waiting for me to go to sleep. What they couldn't tell me, who he was, what he wanted, why he'd chosen that particular cabin, that particular day, me specifically. The coincidence bothered everyone involved. What were the odds that someone would break into an isolated cabin on the exact day someone was there alone? My parents suggested he might have been watching, might have known I'd be alone. That possibility was somehow worse than random chance. We never found him. No fingerprints matched anyone in the system. No similar break-ins reported. The investigation went cold within weeks. I never went back to the cabin. My parents sold it the following spring. But sometimes I wonder about that day, about the hours I spent convinced I was alone, sitting by the fire, drinking coffee, while a stranger stood hidden in my bedroom closet, listening to me move through the house, watching me through the crack in the door, waiting with patience I can't comprehend for night to fall and for me to sleep. And I think about those footprints that didn't lead away, about the moment I understood what that meant, about how close I came to never understanding at all. Northern Oregon has highways that exist outside normal geography, roads that connect nothing to nothing, passing through forests so dense that cell signals die and GPS systems give up. I was somewhere on one of these roads when it happened, though I couldn't tell you exactly where. The map had suggested it was a shortcut. The reality was hours of empty asphalt threading through trees that blocked the sun even at midday. This was supposed to be therapeutic, a solo road trip to clear my head, escape routine, rediscover whatever people rediscover when they drive aimlessly through beautiful places. Instead, I had found isolation so complete it felt aggressive. I'd been monitoring my gas gauge carefully, or so I thought. The nearest station was 45 minutes away according to my phone, which wasn't ideal but manageable. I'd driven further than that before on empty. Except the GPS stopped updating. I noticed it slowly, checking my phone, seeing 35 minutes remaining, checking again 5 minutes later and seeing the same number. The little car icon on the map had frozen mid-route, stuck in digital amber. I was troubleshooting this, tapping the screen, when the engine coughed. The sound was distinctive, that particular sputter that means fuel starvation, the mechanical equivalent of a death rattle. It happened again 30 seconds later, more pronounced. Then the engine cut out completely. I coasted to the shoulder in absolute silence, the kind of quiet that makes you aware of your own heartbeat. Turned the key, nothing. Not even the attempt to turn over, just dead electrical silence. I sat there for a full minute, processing the situation I had navigated myself into. Miles from anything, no cell signal, that's why the GPS had frozen. Surrounded by forest so thick and dark it looked like it absorbed light. And no one knew exactly where I was, because I'd been driving without a specific destination. The forest on both sides of the road felt wrong. Too quiet, too dark, despite it being early evening. Fog hung in the canopy like something solid, pressing down. Looking at it through my windows gave me the physical sensation of being watched by something vast and patient. I grabbed a flashlight from the glove box, one of those heavy mag lights that works as a weapon if needed, and got out. Locked the car manually with the key since electronics were dead. The sound of my car doors closing echoed briefly, then got swallowed by the forest's silence. If my GPS had frozen at 35 minutes, I reasoned, and I'd driven maybe 10 or 15 more minutes before noticing, then the gas station might only be 20 or 25 minutes away. Walking fast, maybe 30 minutes. It was my only option. I started walking. The road stretched ahead into fog and darkness, empty in both directions as far as I could see, which wasn't far. My flashlight helped, but not much. The beam seemed to dissipate into fog after about 10 feet, like it was being absorbed before it could properly illuminate anything. The forest pressed close on both sides. I tried not to look directly at it because my peripheral vision kept insisting there were shapes moving between trees, shadows that shouldn't move, patterns that resembled limbs or faces or watching eyes. When I looked directly, they resolved into trees and darkness and fog, nothing more. But the sense of presence never left. 5 minutes in, I heard branches snap. Not the ambient sounds of wind or trees settling. These were sharp cracks of wood breaking under weight, something stepping on deadfall, something moving through undergrowth with mass and intention. I stopped walking. The forest went silent immediately, like it had been caught doing something it shouldn't. I aimed my flashlight toward the sound, seeing only trees and shadows and that impenetrable darkness between them. The longer I looked, the more convinced I became that something was looking back, that if I stared long enough, I'd see it clearly, and seeing it clearly would be the worst possible outcome. I started walking again, faster now, scanning the forest edge while trying not to look like I was scanning. The animal part of my brain was screaming about being prey, about things that hunt by following, about showing fear through running. A few minutes later, I saw it, a large shape off to the right, visible only because my flashlight happened to catch it at the right angle. A car. Old sedan, halfway into the forest, driver's door hanging open. I approached slowly, flashlight beam shaking slightly. The car looked like it had been there for weeks, maybe months. Windows grimy, interior visible as empty seats and scattered debris. But here's what disturbed me. It wasn't crashed. No damage to the front end, no broken glass, no skid marks on the road. Someone had driven it carefully to the forest edge and abandoned it, or been forced to abandon it. The driver's door was open just wide enough to suggest quick exit, escape. The car's position, pulled far enough off the road that passing vehicles wouldn't notice it, suggested someone had specifically wanted it hidden. I didn't call out, didn't shine my light deeper into the woods. Every instinct said that looking too long, showing too much interest would trigger something I wasn't prepared to handle. Movement in the bushes behind the car, a rustle, deliberate and close. Then another sound, and another. Multiple sources. Things moving through the forest parallel to the road, keeping pace with me but staying just out of sight. I turned toward the road, and that's when I saw them. Not clearly, but clearly enough. Figures between the trees. More than one, 3, maybe 4, running through the forest in that peculiar crouch that suggested familiarity with the terrain. They moved without making much sound, which was worse than if they'd been loud. Silence meant practice, meant intention, meant this wasn't their first time. I started walking faster, not quite running but close. The footsteps in the forest matched my pace immediately, multiple sets of feet crunching through undergrowth, shadowing my progress. I didn't look directly at them, didn't shine my light at them. Some animal instinct said that acknowledgement would escalate the situation in ways I couldn't survive. My heart was hammering so hard I could hear it. My hands shook, making the flashlight beam dance erratically. Everything in my body screamed to run, but running meant being chased, and being chased meant... A truck appeared beside me so suddenly I nearly fell backward. I hadn't heard it approach over my own panic. A pickup, old and dusty, driven by a man who looked maybe 50, gray-bearded and tired, but not immediately threatening. He rolled down his window. "You stranded?" His voice was rough, but not unkind. "What are you doing walking out here? You're a long way from anything." The moment he spoke, the forest went silent. The footsteps stopped. The presence that had been shadowing me vanished like it had never existed. Everything just stopped. I managed to explain, car out of gas, walking to nearest station. He almost smiled, like I'd suggested swimming to China. "Hop in, I'll take you to the station. Think you're a lot further than you realize." I hesitated. Every horror story I'd ever heard involved accepting rides from strangers, but the alternative, staying out here with whatever had been following me, felt worse. Sometimes you choose between dangers and hope you've picked the lesser one. I got in. The man was exactly what he appeared to be, a local farmer who took this road regularly, had never seen someone walking alone at night, figured something must be seriously wrong. No hidden agenda, no sinister purpose, just someone helping because the alternative was leaving a person to whatever haunted these woods. The drive to the gas station took 25 minutes. I would have been walking for hours, if I'd made it at all. When we arrived, he patted my shoulder and wished me luck. That was it. He drove away, and I bought a gas can and called the police, finally having cell signal. The cop who drove me back to my car was professional and kind. But when we arrived, my stomach dropped. The car had been moved. Not far, maybe 50 feet, but definitely moved. It was now positioned at the forest edge, driver's door hanging open, exactly like the abandoned sedan I'd found earlier. Someone had pushed it there while I was gone, positioned it deliberately, hidden it from casual view. I told the officer everything then. The footsteps, the figures, the abandoned car, all of it. He took notes, looked troubled, but ultimately had nothing to offer. They'd search the area, file a report, but these woods were vast, and the highway saw little traffic. Without witnesses or evidence, there wasn't much to investigate. The other car I'd found had no plates, no VIN that could be traced, no way to identify who it had belonged to or what had happened to them. Months later, I still think about that night, about the figures moving through the forest, about the abandoned car that someone before me had found themselves next to, probably also out of gas or broken down, probably also walking alone in the dark. About what would have happened if that truck hadn't appeared exactly when it did. Sometimes I try to calculate the odds, my GPS freezing at the exact stretch of highway where those things waited, running out of gas at the precise location where they hunted, the truck arriving in the narrow window between being followed and whatever came next. But odds don't explain the feeling I had out there. The certainty that I was being herded, that running out of gas wasn't accident, but design somehow. That the forest itself was complicit in something old and patient and hungry. I don't take that highway anymore. Don't take any empty roads through dense forest if I can help it. Because I learned something that night about the spaces between cities, about the places where cell signals die and GPS stops working and help is hours away. Something lives in those spaces. Something that knows when you are alone, and it waits, patient and practiced, for the moment when your car stops running and you have to start walking. And if you're very, very lucky, someone comes along to save you before you see clearly what's been watching you walk past abandoned cars on the side of the road. One more traveler who didn't make it to wherever they were going. One more car to mark the spot where someone disappeared.